Not long ago, I was playing a board game that I love with my mother, who I also love, and she pointed out that on the back of the box there was a publisher address, and it was the same city that I currently live in. I took a look, and not only did I recognise the street name, I was fairly confident I knew which building that was. This took me back a little bit. I've never really thought a lot about where games come from before. Board games are a big part of my life as a hobby, but for all I know, they just grow on trees. If you can't tell from my sexy accent and my solid 6 out of 10 good looks, I'm from the United Kingdom, or the UK as literally nobody calls it. It got me thinking, what other games have we made? Are we good at making games? Are we the best at making games? After all, the UK is a big place. Did you know you can fit the entire of the USA into Wales alone if you simply resize the image like I've done here? Curious to find out just which nation is the best at making board games, I spent several days creating a long-ass spreadsheet with the intent of finding out. If you're not aware, Board Game Geek, or BGG, is a website where, among other things, people can rank board games. The BGG listings are the foundation of the data I'm going to use in this video. Now, the BGG list is not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. It obviously only accounts for the opinions of people who have rated their games on BGG. That said, this list doesn't mean nothing. There are a lot of people all over the world that do rank their games on BGG, and you don't get to the top of this list without being a very, very good game. So, let me tell you about the system that I'll be using. I took the top 300 games from Board Game Geek. Of those 300, I culled 21, which I considered to be variants of the same game. Second edition, slight updates and the like. This isn't always clear cut and kinda just came down to my opinion. Your mileage may vary a little, but I always left in the higher ranking game. That bumped up 21 games from below, giving us the top 300 games in the world. I then assigned every game a score, the inverse of its position on the list. So at the top, we've got Brass Birmingham scoring 300 points, and at the bottom of my list, Navigador scoring just 1 point. That score is then split in half. Half the points go to the nation of the designer, and half the points go to the nation of the publisher. If we take a look at Brass Birmingham here at the top spot, we have 300 points. We cut that in half. 150 points will be split 3 ways between 3 designers, and 150 points to Canadian publisher Roxley. Looks like the UK's off to a promising start, 50 points right off the bat. Now, you might argue that a 50-50 split here isn't fair, that maybe the designer contributes more, but I think ultimately this is really going to come down to a game-by-game basis that we can't factor in for, so I think a 50-50 split is fair. Of course, there's also other people involved, like artists whose contributions are invaluable, but right now we're just looking at designers and publishers. It's also worth noting that on BGG there is often a plus others link for both designers and publishers, but we are only using what is credited on the initial game page. Most of the geographical locations could be found on Board Game Geek, but sometimes I had to go elsewhere. Personal websites, LinkedIn profiles, X and the like, sometimes really going down some rabbit holes. Ironically enough, the group that was hardest to source any information on were this trio of the now defunct Sleuth Productions, who made Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. Looking up Raymond Edmonds in particular leads to some interesting results. It's also worth noting that with designers, I didn't use the country they were born in, but rather where they now work and reside. I did this in truth because it was by far the more consistent bit of information I could dig up, but actually the more I thought about it, the more I figured I think that is the correct way to do it anyway. It was occasionally quite frustrating. Take Alan R. Moon, for example, British creator of Ticket to Ride. You may have heard of it, who gave all his points to America. Traitor. You're dead to me. Right, let's get into it. So, starting off, we've got a couple of countries that just crept their way onto the list: South Korea, Greece, Ukraine, Cyprus, Uruguay, Slovakia, Brazil, Albania, and then China being the first country to hit 100 points, exclusively for the game Go, which happened to land at the 201 position. We've got Australia there with 246, a big chunk of that score coming from Blood on the Clock Tower. Singapore, rarely scoring big, but scoring frequent partial scores as the home of CMON Games, Cool Mini or Not. spot. Sweden there getting a nice chunk from Terraforming Mars, a very respectable 377 from Japan, which is the country that makes pretty much everything else I love in the world. Norway and Hungary scoring an identical 403, and it's here that the scores really start to take off. New Zealand getting a very impressive 748.5, mostly from Garfield Games. And then there's the UK, disappointingly just missing out on the 1,000 point mark. Italy scoring well, and Poland scoring very well, a lot of its score coming from the fantastic Awakened Realms. We love you, Awakened Realms. We've got the Czech Republic, Canada, France doing very well, and then we come to Germany, who are literally off the chart. How far off the chart?
It's over 9,000!
9,017.85, over 3 times the score of France. Incredible. But we're not done. You knew it was coming. Right after Germany, we've got the United States of America. Also off the chart, but how much off the chart? Let's just scroll up. A little more. A little more. Jesus Christ, a little more. 18,352.825 points. A ridiculous and definitive lead for the USA, leading so strongly. We could arbitrarily knock off half their score and they'd still win. We could group every country that isn't America or Germany together and they'd still win. So according to the American website BGG, used mostly by Americans I presume, America is the best at making board games. Sus. Whilst collecting data for this, it did become fairly obvious fairly quickly that America would be taking the top spot. One of the reasons for this is that non-American designers would frequently be working with American publishers, whereas American games almost always took the entirety of their scores. So, let's go a little deeper. The United States is divided into states. Which state can state that they are the best at making board games? These states all made appearances, but the top 10 are as follows: Tennessee, Ohio, New Hampshire, Washington, Missouri, Indiana, New York, Colorado, California, and at the top spot, Minnesota. So just what's going on in Minnesota? Well, there are some big players over there. Among others, we've got the likes of Chip Theory Games, Leader Games, Z-Man Games, and of course, Fantasy Flight Games. Fantasy Flight Games with the likes of Twilight Imperium, Arkham Horror, Star Wars Rebellion, Marvel Champions, and many, many, many more. Contributing 2,823 points to America's score, enough to place them here by themselves. Fantasy Flight Games has a legitimate claim as the greatest board game publisher in the world. In America, the greatest board gaming nation in the world. Except there is just this one thing. You know, America is a pretty big place. After all, you can fit the entire rest of the world into Florida alone if you simply resize the image like I've done here. What if we were to take population into consideration? America may have some incredibly talented board game making individuals, but is that representative of the population at large? If I was to approach a random person on the street and say, "Make me a good board game," is America really my best bet? America has a population of 333.3 million people. If we divide their score by 333.3, that gives our average American citizen a board game making power level of 55.06. Germany has a population of 83.8 million, giving their citizens a power level of 107.61. The average German is almost twice as good at making games as the average American. France, a power level of 39.44, not quite enough to topple America. Canada, a power level of 50.98, close but no cigar. But the UK, the United Kingdom, the good old UK, with a population of just 66.97 million, scores a whopping 14.59. Not even close. Even if we just do England, we're still only at 17.46. Portugal has a power level of 58.26. Denmark a power level of 59.54. Belgium 59.96. Finland 66.45. Norway 73.85. Austria 86.23. And New Zealand, an average citizen game-making power level of 146.07, dethroning even Germany. That's right, New Zealand, home of Kiwis, home of orcs and hobbits, is now the greatest board gaming nation in the world, right after our last country. Have you ever played this game? Have you ever noticed this logo? CGE, Czech Games Edition. With a population of just 10.67 million, the Czech Republic has an average citizen game-making power level of 158.08, almost 3 times that of America. Czech and mate. We have reached the end of our journey. The Czech Republic crowned the greatest board game makers in the world. They'll make you Through the Ages. They'll make you The Lost Ruins of Arnak. They'll make you code names. They'll probably make you a sandwich if you ask them nicely in whatever language they speak. I don't know, German maybe, I'll have to check. Either one, bow down to our new gaming overlords, the Czech Republic. Except there is just this other thing. Is this fair? Are we doing America dirty here? Is it really fair to compare the entire United States to the Czech Republic? What would happen if we compared Minnesota to the Czech Republic? Well, with a population of 5.7 million, the average citizen in Minnesota's power level is 832.27, making the Czech Republic's 158 look pretty weak. Okay, but a state is a region of a country. So what region of the Czech Republic does CGE come from? Prague. Prague has a population of 1.3 million, giving Prague's citizens a power level of 1,288.57, still beating Minnesota. But hang on, is Prague a region or a city? It's a city, right? So we need to hone down even further on Minnesota. Where in Minnesota are all the games coming from? And that would be Roseville. Roseville is the home of both Z-Man Games and Fantasy Flight. And with a population of just 35,627, the citizens of Roseville, Minnesota, USA have a mighty power level of 93,994.72. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we have a winner. Except there is just this other thing. There is one location I found that ranks even higher than Roseville, Minnesota. We're going back to Germany. Lookout Games, German publisher responsible for the likes of Caverna, Agricola, Le Havre and more. Based in Schwabenheim an der Sels, I hope I said that right, with a population of only 2,589, gives us the most insane game-making power level of 477,443.02. It is official. Schwabenheim an der Sels is the greatest board game making location in the world. Except there is just this other thing. I feel like this system that I've devised isn't really fit for purpose. The more we hone in on a very specific place, the more we're ultimately just honing in on specific people, and that's not the point. I think we need a clean slate. We need to go back to the drawing board and just take a fresh look at this. Let's go back to Board Game Geek and just take a look at the top 10 games. So top of the list we've got Brass Birmingham, which is of course based on the game that is now known as Brass Lancashire. Birmingham, a city in England, Lancashire, a county in England. We've got War of the Ring there, based on British author J.R.R. Tolkien's literary works, where he famously tried to create what he hoped would be a kind of folklore for Britain. We've got Star Wars Rebellion, Star Wars of course, filmed famously in Elstree Studios just outside London. We've got Ark Nova, a game about building a scientific zoo, London Zoo of course, the oldest scientific zoo in the world. 2 Gloomhaven games there, Gloomhaven clearly inspired by Haven Holidays, where UK kids go to have a gloomy time. We've got Twilight Imperium, where you build a galactic empire. I mean, which nation built the biggest empire in history? Hello! We've got Terraforming Mars, blatantly drawing inspiration from the British confectionery, the Mars Bar. There's Dune Imperium. I mean, who wrote Dune? Let me just look that up. Okay, don't worry about that one. But the point is, Britain inspires the best games. Therefore, the best place to make games is Britain. Ergo, Britain is the greatest board game making nation in the world. Except that's complete horseshit. No, we're not doing that anymore. We're done. Britain wins. All of the other countries are tied for second place. Case closed. The verdict is in. The people have spoken. I will no longer be accepting questions at this time. Thank you for watching the video. Please like, comment and subscribe.